Karen Stever with the Griffin GGS Pros, and today I want to talk to you in this brief webinar about a fertilizer strategy that can be used for garden mums from start to finish. As I work through the stages of production, I'm going to talk in terms of water-soluble fertilizers throughout this short webinar, and then at the end I will talk about how to adjust the program if you're also using controlled release fertilizers or only using controlled release fertilizers. But the water soluble fertilizers demonstrate clearly what the overall strategy is. First step is mum establishment. Mums perform best if we get a branching structure established early in them. This occurs during the first 2 to 3 weeks of production. And the strategy is to push soft growth with a high phosphorus fertilizer like 20-10-20 or triple 20 to get that branching structure. And we're also going to use a relatively high rate for our initial watering as well as these first weeks of establishment at 300 parts per million nitrogen, whichever fertilizer you're using. The next stage is the growth and development of the flowers. During this stage, after our establishment, we want to reduce the fertilizer concentration down to 200 parts per million, and at the same time, we want to reduce that phosphate concentration. Plants store phosphate, and we've bulked them up pretty hard here at the start. So we're going to change the phosphate by changing the formulation to something lower, like 21-5-20 versus the 20-20-20. During this growth and development stage, it's also necessary to maintain the pH. Plants will give you signs if the pH goes high above the range, and if the pH does rise above 5.8, it's necessary to lower it and to make some corrections. What happens when the pH goes up is that the iron in the fertilizer becomes less available to the plant. It actually becomes insoluble and the mums can't take it up. Mum-specific fertilizers have extra iron to try to prevent this from happening. And then in the case that you do see iron deficiency, we can lower that pH by watering with a more acidic fertilizer or nutrient solution. And we can also supplement chelated iron, just push the iron concentration in the soil, and the chelated iron will be more available for a while then. That will green up your mums. Sprint is the chelated iron that we sell. Once we get past the growth phase, we begin the early flowering phase. At this stage, when you have about 20% of the flowers showing color, we want to reduce the fertilizer concentration more. The mums essentially stop growing at this point and don't really have a high fertilizer demand, so 100 parts per million is typically enough to keep them well supplied. We'll still be using the 21-5-20 here if you're liquid feeding or some other similar low phosphorus fertilizer. You can sometimes see phosphorus deficiency. This is due to the high phosphorus demand of those maturing buds. We can correct this by supplementing for a few irrigations with either the 20-10-20 again or 20-20-20 fertilizers to supply that phosphorus. So that is our program. I've pointed out a few of the pitfalls and demonstrated the program with water-soluble fertilizers. But sometimes controlled release fertilizers are used and actually often used at least in a half and half program. And for some growers, complete controlled release is the best option. And that occurs primarily when overhead irrigation is used 100%. On the plus side, the controlled release fertilizer provides a constant feed and it doesn't influence the pH, which could be good or bad depending on what you need. On the other hand, the water-soluble fertilizer is most often preferred with drip irrigation and gives the most flexibility. But then we can get the best of both worlds to some extent by a combination of the controlled release fertilizers with the water soluble fertilizers. And then we have to change our programs slightly. Then we'll go to clear water because of our controlled release is a full dose in there until the finish. With a half and half program that I said can give you the best of both worlds, we're going to reduce our initial irrigation and establishment concentration just a bit to 250 parts per million of nitrogen, and we'll do that at a constant feed. But when we move into the growth phase, we'll supplement with 300 parts per million just once per week. And of course, all of this depends on the amount of controlled release fertilizer that you have put in the pots. GGS Pro would be happy to help you with that. We've worked out the rates of the most common fertilizers used for mum production, and we can supply you the tablespoons if you are top dressing or a poundage rate if you're incorporating the fertilizer into your soil. So we're happy to help with that. Please just request it from GGS Pro. You can contact us at this email or this phone extension shown here. We'll be happy to help you. We'd also love to hear any comments you have about our webinar series, and if you have any suggestions for topics that you would like to see covered, please just let us know, and we'll definitely take that into consideration. Thanks for your time today. Have a good day.